my life, it sounds pretty, it is, it's awesome. Mm-hmm. But not every part of life is awesome. And so March 2018, my wife and I were on a vacation celebrating her birthday. And our youngest son sent us a text and said goodbye. And he took his own life that night. And the reality is our lives have never been the same.
Yeah. And it's unfathomable as a father, but I can't imagine, even for someone who doesn't have kids, to imagine something that traumatic happening. And it was completely unexpected, right?
No, still, I mean, I had 4 kids, Ryan being the youngest, but 4 teenagers. And I thought, if I was stacking my youngest, all my kids back then, he was the least grumpy of all the teenagers. Him and I would have, when I was in town, which is, 3-4 nights a week, we'd have dinner, and then him and I would go down and watch the show together, right? And we talk, and he didn't exhibit the signs that I saw or knew at the time. But looking back now and understanding better, there were some signs. I just didn't know what to look for. I didn't ever have a conversation about mental health with any of my kids because I didn't think I had to. And I missed it.
Well, we come from the generation where you rub dirt on it too, in your defense. I mean, that's the way we were raised, with just dealing with it. And it's not that some of these issues didn't exist, which is why I find it interesting in this day and age where it's so much more acknowledged. You still have mental health issues and depression and anxiety in the 50s, but it wasn't something that anyone was proud enough to bring up.
It wasn't as extreme. I mean, the world has changed so much. So, yeah, it's interesting because it's coming up on 7 years, right? And I go through life and I have fun. I have great days, but that
never leaves the vision you have. Yeah. And
yep.
And I mean, he was seemingly such a otherwise funny kid, and
he was a great kid, engaged. No one saw it coming, right? It was just and that's the thing that people don't understand about mental health. So since that happened, I've dove into the world of mental health, especially for kids. So I started an organization. It's now called tellmystory.org. You can go to that website. And I did a TED Talk right out of the gate, which was very raw. I did another TED Talk called the Hot Lava Talk, which compares living as a 14-year-old kid myself versus Ryan. I'll get into that in a second.
Interesting.
We did a movie called Tell My Story, which you can see on Amazon. And
it's fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we did a more recent movie called What I Wish My Parents Knew, which is a program we put into schools across the U.S. and across the world. We had 17 showings in Panama 2 weeks ago by the Catholic University down there. They did a study, which was really interesting. I'll share with you in a minute based on the movie. And we're doing a new movie for kids that we're going to shoot this first quarter. So I have people that are spending time getting this in front of parents, this message in front of parents that you have to own your kids' mental health, and the message in front of kids that you have to share how you feel with your parents. Right?
Easier said than done, right?
Oh, none of it's easy.
Do you have any advocates that are kids that can talk to kids?
We have kids that, that will go and push this film into their schools. The biggest challenge that we have is everybody's so busy and nobody wants to pay attention, and everybody's afraid. So if you take a look at the stats, right? I mean, 40% of kids, depending on what stats you want to believe, have had some kind of depression, anxiety issue in the last year.
That's a huge number.
And parents are the same. So we're all dealing with something, right? And if you look back as to why, and I didn't understand any of this until I've been in the space now for many years I've been in it. When that phone rang when you and I were growing up, like we said, it was attached to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Dad answered it. Dad decided if you were able to talk to that person. He usually stood there while you're talking to the person and until you go, I'll just see you at school tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you yell at your father into your room.
Yeah.
Right. Our bullies, I was bullied constantly. I was a sickly kid. I was bullied constantly, but my bully stayed at school. Home was a sanctuary. Well, in my case, it was kind of a sanctuary, but it was a sanctuary. Right?
Interesting sanctuary.
Yeah. But I wasn't paying attention to the world. I didn't read the news. There were only a couple of TV shows I watched. I didn't watch the news. Yeah. I don't remember growing up with exception. It was the Cold War. So we joke about going under the table for a nuclear attack, which none of us understood.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It was just you're right. Life context was kind of relative, and
I need to go play with my friends. I'm going to ride my bike. I want to go fishing. I want to build a fort. That's life.
Yeah.
Right. These days, it's so friggin' different. People want to blame social media, but it's not just social media. It's the fact that these kids know and fear that there's going to be an actual nuclear war. They're worried about what's happening with Putin in the Ukraine. They're worried about what's happening in the Middle East. They're worried about who's going to be elected and what's going to happen when that person's elected. Both sides. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're really upset.
Do you think some of that is handed down? I mean, I had a scenario, without diverting too much, where we had a vote in second grade on the Carter and Ford.
Yeah.
And I was the only kid in my class. I was in Austin, Texas at the time. I was the only kid in my class that voted for Carter. Everybody else was for Ford. And I thought, that's interesting. I'm sorry. It was reversed. I voted for Ford. Everyone else had Carter, which now is completely flipped. In terms of red or blue, it's completely flipped. But at the time, the experiment was nice and show you how the process goes. But obviously, the kids are just going home and having a conversation with their parents and then coming back to school with the answer. Do you think some of that is transferred from the parents who are now feeling more extreme in terms of...
I wouldn't even blame the parents. I mean, maybe in some cases, I would just say the access to information. They're coming up with their own decisions. Right. And if they're not worried about that, then they go to, well, what does it all matter? Because global warming is going to destroy the planet and climate change is going to destroy the planet in 10 years. Why are we even here? Mm-hmm. So the anxiety levels are much higher. Education. I got into college because my aunt worked in the admissions office. That's the only reason I got into college. I barely made it out of high school. Right. My business partners went to UC Santa Barbara. They got in with a 2.9 or a 3.1, 30 years ago. You can't get into UC Santa Barbara right now without a 4.5 and a whole bunch of other stuff that's, you're not getting in.
Yeah.
So these kids are like high anxiety to get good grades, high anxiety because of the world, high anxiety because they see their friends on social media out there having fun and they're not there. And then they're failing in their minds. And I'm not blaming parents because I don't think parents are doing this to them. Parents are they're confused on their own.
Yeah.
But they're their kids are I have to perform. We did this study I didn't do it, but someone took our stuff and they took the film, What I Wish My Parents Knew, into Panama, and the Catholic University asked questions that we can't ask in the States. And they asked these kids, 500 different kids responded, and they asked them, have you ever thought about killing yourself in the last year?
How old do you mind me asking?
Middle school, high school.
Middle school, high school.
56% said yes.
Oh. Insane.
It's off the charts.